All right, good evening, everyone. Good evening, good evening. It is a schos Baruch Hashem to continue in our series in Chodesh Elul. So what I would like to try to do tonight is actually something a little bit different. The original plan was to focus on L'David Hashem Ori V'Yishi, Kapitel Chav Zayin, which we're saying over the course of Chodesh Elul, to the Yom Noraim. But then the truth is something else caught my eye a little bit. 1 second here. Something else caught my eye a little bit that I wanted to share with you that I think perhaps also could help us relate to Chodesh Elul in a little bit more of an impactful and meaningful way. So let's begin with source number 1. Again, still a quote from Tehillim. David HaMelech writes, Tiku b'chodesh shofar b'kesa liyom chagenu. So literally again, sound the shofar on the new moon, on the appointed time for the day of our festival. So this is an incredibly important pasuk for the season in which we are in, as the Gemara in number 2 of Maseches Rosh Hashanah says, Tiku b'chodesh shofar b'kesa liyom chagenu. So interestingly enough, so it's not like so much of Sefer Tehillim, it's not immediately clear like what is David HaMelech referring to? Like what's the pasuk about? What's the message? So the Gemara says, so let's analyze. Tiku b'chodesh shofar, so literally again, sound the shofar during the month, b'kesa liyom chagenu, when it, which sounds like the moon, is hidden at the time of our yontiv. So sound the shofar during a yontiv at the time when the moon is hidden during yontiv. So the Gemara says, when is the moon hidden during yontiv? Eizu chag shachodesh miskasebo. Which month of the year? Which month of the year is the moon hidden? To which the Gemara says, Havi Omer zeh Rosh Hashanah. It refers to Rosh Hashanah, because remember again, interestingly enough, about all of our Yom Tovim always occur when? Middle of the month. So remember, not all of them, but remember, Sukkot is the 15th of the month. Pesach is the 15th of the month. Shavuos is different. Shavuos is the 6th. So machlokes, whether or not Shavuos was the 6th or the 7th of Sivan. But again, Shavuos is the 6th. But the idea is that Yom Tovim generally occur in the middle of the month. Now the truth is, Pesach really sets the paradigm for that. Remember, why is Pesach the middle of the month? Why is Pesach the middle of the month? Right, so remember again, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu took us out of Mitzrayim, so remember Exodus occurred at night. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu is always looking out for us. Yibon Shalom is the consummate Baal Chesed. He's always trying to look out for us, always trying to take care of us. And as such, he takes us out during a time of the month when there is the greatest amount of illumination. Again, it's harder for us to appreciate these things because we live in an age of artificial light. But again, if you're ever at a place where there's not a lot of artificial light, the moon is brilliant and the moon is beautiful and the moon gives off a tremendous amount of natural light. In any event, so the Gemara says, so which is the Yom Tov in which the moon is hidden? Which Yom Tov is the moon hidden? The Gemara says there's only one. Havi Omer Zeh Rosh Hashanah. The only Yom Tov in which the moon is not visible, because remember again, the moon waxes and wanes, and the way it works, we all know this. The moon at the beginning of the month is barely visible, then it becomes a little bit larger. By mid-month, it's complete, and then it begins to wane again as the month closes out. So which is the only Yom Tov in which the moon is not visible? Have Omer Zeh Rosh Hashanah. This is Rosh Hashanah, v'ka'amar rachmana shofar. And the pasuk says shofar. So interesting, tiku b'chodesh shofar. So when do you go ahead? During which new moon, during which month do you blow the shofar? B'kesa liyom chagenu. On the Yom Tov, when the moon is hidden. Which is the only Yom Tov in which the moon is hidden? Rosh Hashanah. Now, obviously, to be clear, this pasuk is not the source for the fact that we blow the shofar in Rosh Hashanah, right? Because the pasuk in the Torah says, and this is not a topic for tonight. Next week, we'll speak a little bit more about Rosh Hashanah, and we'll delve into, that's our official pre-Yom Tov shir slot next, right? Is next week? Right. Pre-Yontiv Shir Slat Emir Hashem. So we're going to talk about the fact that Rosh Hashanah is perhaps one of the most enigmatic Yomim Tovim. The fact that you could have a day in which literally the fate of all mankind, the fate of the universe is being decided, and yet the Torah says absolutely nothing about it. The Torah simply tells us that Rosh Hashanah is a Yom Trua, Rosh Hashanah is a day of Trua. We don't even know what Trua means. But again, we'll say that for later on. The point that I'm trying to make to you over here is David HaMelech is highlighting the central role that the moon plays within our lives. There is a Yom Tov in which you blow the shofar. It's the Yom Tov which occurs when the moon is hidden. But the truth is, we already appreciate the significance of the moon long before David HaMelech. If you take a look at number 3, so this is in the beginning of Shmos, Parshas Bo. The first mitzvah that the Torah gives us. First mitzvah. Now again, the truth is, I should say it's the first national mitzvah. Now there are mitzvahs given in Sefer Bereshis. For example, Adam and Chava are told Pru or Revu, to procreate. There's mitzvah of Gida Anosha, not consuming the sciatic nerve. In general, we have a concept, bris milah, but generally there's a concept of ein lemedin davar mikodem matan Torah. No binding halacha is learned before Sinaitic revelation. So anything that occurs in Bereshis is usually said again later on, somewhere else in the Torah. The first mitzvah that is given to us as a people is in number 3. The first mitzvah, first national mitzvah given to us while we were in Egypt, HaChodesh hazeh lochem rosh chadoshim rishon hu l'chodshei hashana. Kadosh Baruch Hu says this month is the first of all months, the first of the year. Which month is it referring to? Nisan. Excellent. What's the mitzvah being given to Klal Yisrael over here? What's the mitzvah? Specifically, Kiddush HaChodesh. Kiddush HaChodesh, the concept of the sanctification of the new moon. Remember again, this is we're not really familiar with this mitzvah as much because we have a set calendar. But before the calendar as we have it was set, how would the Sanhedrin declare Rosh Chodesh? 2 witnesses would come. They'd show up in front of the Sanhedrin in the Beis HaMikdash. They'd give testimony. The moon looked like this, the moon looked like that. They'd be cross-examined and questioned and everything else. And if their testimony checked out, Beis Din would declare Rosh Chodesh. Now the good news is, we know in the Jewish calendar, a month is either 29 days or 30 days, right? So we already know that the latest Rosh Chodesh is by day 31. But nevertheless, there was this concept of Kiddush HaChodesh. The concept of Baruch Hu saying that at the end of the day, how do you declare the new month? People come, and Beis Din, the high court, is responsible for going ahead and declaring the new month. Why is this the first mitzvah? Right? Let me ask it differently. If Kadosh Baruch Hu consulted you, right, wanted your opinion on what should be the first mitzvah for Klal Yisrael, what would you suggest? Shabbos is a good one. Yeah. Pretty much anything other than Kiddush HaChodesh, right? In other words, that this mitzvah seems to be totally uninspiring, not really relevant for the overwhelming majority. I mean, it's relevant for us because we need to know when Rosh Chodesh is, but 99% of the population is not involved in it. So it's interesting that the first mitzvah that the Ribono Shel Olam gives to us is Kiddush HaChodesh. And there are many answers and interpretations or explanations for this. 2 that are the most primary and common ones, which is number 1, HaKadosh Baruch Hu was telling us Kiddush HaChodesh means that we have the ability to control time. So remember again, what's incredibly unique about our calendar is we control it. In fact, if you look, the way Kiddush on Shabbos and Yom Tov is structured is dramatically different. How do we end Kiddush on Friday night? Baruch Atah Hashem, Mekadesh HaShabbos. Who creates the sanctity of Shabbos? Who? The Ribono Shel Olam. We all know this, right? Shabbos comes candlelighting, and it's getting earlier and earlier, right? So it comes, I think like this week is like 7:50, maybe something like that, right? 6:50, sorry, right? I don't do that much at home, so it's all right. 6:50, right? And what's incredible is that it's Shabbos whether you're ready or not, right? In other words, like it makes absolutely no difference, like what you think or what your involvement is. Shabbos comes. That's why I say Baruch Atah Hashem Mekadesh HaShabbos. The sanctity of Shabbos comes from Hashem. Contrast that with Kiddush on Yom Tov. How do we end off Kiddush on Yom Tov? Baruch Atah Hashem Mekadesh Yisrael v'Hazmanim. Blessed are you, Hashem, who blesses Klal Yisrael and the Yomim Tovim. Why is that the bracha? Because what they're saying is Kadosh Baruch Hu, you've endowed us with Kedusha, and as a result, we take our Kedusha and we endow Yom Tov with Kedusha. We make Yom Tov. So what HaKadosh Baruch Hu was showing us was we have control over time. If there's one thing that a slave does not control, it is his time. A slave is on someone else's schedule. A slave is bound by someone else's daily routine. A slave has zero time autonomy. The first mitzvah that the Ribono Shel Olam gives us is time autonomy. I control my time, which is incredibly important because for many of us, the greatest excuse for non-performance in life is I didn't have time. So remember, time is a finite, non-renewable resource, and therefore you have to use it in the right way. If you didn't have time for something, it means you didn't allocate time for that thing. Now, maybe there's a good reason why I didn't allocate time for it, but you can't blame on not having time. There's time. There's time. And you know what the great part about time is? The great part about time is there's no surprises, right? It's not like, oh my gosh, there was 1 hour less today, right? Or in other words, like there was 50 minutes shorter today. It's the same amount of time. Same amount of time. You know how it works every single day. Okay, sunrise, sunset changes, but day starts at the same time, ends at the same time. You have the same block of time, same number of hours. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, don't live a life of excuses saying you don't have time. You chose not to allocate time, which, by the way, is fine. I chose to allocate time to this and not to that. That's a decision. That's a decision. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, there's no such thing as I didn't have time. Time is yours. HaChodesh Hazal Lachem, time is yours. That's reason. So now when you think about it through that perspective, what a powerful mitzvah to give us the first mitzvah. But there's another reason as well. The other reason is what we're going to focus on tonight is there's a very strong connection between Klal Yisrael and the moon. A very strong connection. What's the connection between Klal Yisrael and the moon? So there's really two pieces. Number one, the moon, we know, does not generate its own light. The moon reflects the light of the sun. So remember, again, if you think about it, the Jew shines with incredible light. But where does my light come from? My light comes from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. My light comes from Torah. My light comes from Ruchnius. I am as luminescent as the spiritual light that I am reflecting. And therefore, again, if I'm not building a life with Ruchnius, and I'm not reflecting the light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu and Torah mitzvahs, my moon is going to be very dull. My light is going to be very dull. But there's even a deeper reason. The power of the moon is that the moon is inconsistent. The moon is inconsistent. The moon waxes and wanes. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu is giving us such a... You know what's interesting? What's the thing we struggle for? What is the thing we struggle most to attain in life? Consistency. What's the thing that we almost never attain in life? Consistency. And by the way, that's by design. On one hand, I want to be consistent. Now, by the way, where does that internal desire for consistency? And by the way, you plug this into anything, right? I want to be consistent in marriage. I want to be consistent as a student. I want to be consistent as a Jew. Everything in life, I want to be consistent. And my greatest struggle in life is consistency. So what's incredible is, where does the desire for consistency come from? Because remember, again, we're made b'tselem Elokim. We are made in the image of God. What makes HaKadosh Baruch Hu the most incredible force in this universe? He's consistent. So there's that part of me that is made in the image of God that I want that. There's only one problem. What's the problem? I'm not God. I'm not God. I'm a human being. And as such, I'm frail, I'm fickle, I have wants, desires, proclivities, all these different things that send me in all different directions. And here's the most liberating thing you will ever learn. The Ribono Shel Olam does not require consistency. He just requires effort to maintain consistency. And those are two very different things. Consistency is a fact. Consistency is a result. The Ribono Shel Olam never demands results. He demands efforts. Because the Ribono Shel Olam knows more than anyone that I can't always deliver results no matter how badly I try. See, isn't it beautiful? See, we become so frustrated with ourselves when we can't be consistent. And that's not a bad thing, because we feel like we're such a disappointment. I was there like, why can I just not be consistent in this one thing? I've been trying so hard for consistency, and I can't become consistent. So part of that is because that's by design. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, I just need you to try to be consistent. I need you to consistently try to be a consistent person. But I don't ask necessarily for consistent results. This is this love affair between Klal Yisrael and the moon. This is why the moon speaks to us so dramatically, right? You go outside tonight. What's the moon gonna look like? What's the moon gonna look like? It's beautiful. I mean, maybe it's cloudy still, right? Beautiful, right? Beautiful. And literally, again, sometimes, especially when it's hanging lower, or it appears like hanging lower in the sky, it's gorgeous, and it's regal, and it's beautiful. And sometimes that's me. Sometimes that's me. Sometimes like I'm firing on all cylinders. I'm doing everything I have to. I'm living my best life. I'm doing what I need to do. It's great. It's great. I'm vibrant. I'm alive. I'm luminescent. And then other times, right, in a week from now, you'll go outside and the moon's going to be much smaller. and you go out 2 weeks from now, and the moon will barely be visible. Sounds a lot like what? Right? Each of us. I have times that I burn bright, I look beautiful, and then there are times where like, I'm so burnt out from just a variety of different things that I barely even show up on the horizon. There's always been this incredible connection between the moon and Klal Yisrael. And it's almost as if, you know what the best thing about the Ribbon Shalom, there's so many, sometimes we forget that we're supposed to be in love with Hashem. We forget about this. The Rambam writes in Hilchos Deos, says something so beautiful. He says that a person is supposed to love Hashem the way a man loves a woman. The Rambam says, and you think to yourself, they don't usually teach that to you in school, right? In other words, what's incredible about it is, why does the Rambam choose that love? Because that's a passionate love. That's a passionate love. There's an intensity there that's different, and there could even be an infatuation that's there that's different than any other kind of love. So the most incredible thing is, the goal is not to be casual friends with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The goal is not to be like, I love you, God, but I think we should see other people. Like it's not to be friends. It's not even to be a parent and a child, and it's not to be a servant and a king. It's to be that I'm just like a man and a woman, to have that intensity of love with the Ribbon Shalom. The reason, so why is it so difficult for us? And I think one of the reasons is because I think so many of us walk around life thinking that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is disappointed in us. Because I'm disappointed in me. I'm disappointed in me. And most of us, right, what number one reason why most of us are disappointed in ourselves, number one reason is because I know I'm inconsistent. I know, and I'm annoyed with myself. I'm disappointed with myself. And so we project, if I'm disappointed with me, HaKadosh Baruch Hu must be disappointed in me. And so because of that, it's almost like, when you project your feelings onto someone else, you create a relationship barrier. So it's almost like unknowingly, we create a barrier between ourselves and HaKadosh Baruch Hu because we assume that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is disappointed in us. And meanwhile, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is like, stop it. Stop. It's not a direct quote, but you understand. Stop it. What are you doing? I love you. I love you more than anything. You're inconsistent. Shkoyach. I created you. I know you better than yourself. And never in a million years did I ever expect you to be consistent. I just expected you to consistently try to be consistent, recognizing that even if you consistently try to be consistent, you're going to be inconsistently inconsistent. or consistently inconsistent, I should say. I got it. I got it. Baruch Hu says. So meanwhile, the Baruch Shalom is like, I love you, you're great. All I need you to do is try. That's all. Just try. Just try. You do deliver results, don't deliver results. I'm so in love with you. And so HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and that's why we one of the greatest things we miss out in life, greatest things, is a loving relationship with Hashem. We walk around fearful of Hashem, we walk around questioning Hashem, all different kinds of things, but we miss the opportunity to fall in love with God. And if you've ever tasted that love, if you've ever experienced that love, there's nothing sweeter and more beautiful in this entire universe. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu's showering it down upon us. We just have to stop being so disappointed in ourselves and projecting it onto HaKadosh Baruch Hu that we allow ourselves to reciprocate that love to Him. HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives us the first mitzvah of the moon. Why? So it's very validating. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, you're the moon. You're the moon. I love you guys. You're all fantastic. You're the moon. You're not the sun. You're not the sun, right? The sun is consistent. The sun is always burning bright. You're not the sun. You're the moon. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, that's okay. That's okay. I love you. I love you for that, because you know what the great part about the moon is? The moon vanishes the end of the month, and then what happens? Comes back. It comes back. That's the greatness of the moon, right? The moon could just disappear into obscurity and remain that way, but it doesn't. Instead, it decides to go ahead and reemerge and resurface and rebuild. And that's all HaKadosh Baruch Hu asks of us again. The reason Hashem gives us this first mitzvah is because this mitzvah is literally the metaphor for what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants of us in this world. Yet, with all of that, I'll show you something very interesting. And by the way, that's why if you'll notice at the beginning of every single month, I don't know if women do this, I don't think so, but that's why first Motzei Shabbos of every single month, what do? Kiddush Levana. Kiddush Levana, right? We go outside, and like the way we get started in the month is when obviously we're not davening to the moon, but we're ultimately making the bracha over the new moon, over Rosh Chodesh. And again, that's how I start the month. I'm the moon is me. We identify with each other, right? This is my experience. So right now, little moon, right? When you go outside for Kiddush Levana, the moon's a nothing. And sometimes I look up and I say like, moon, I know exactly how you feel. Because that's how pretty much I feel about myself as well. But that's okay. Let's go through this journey together. You're going to get bigger and better and brighter over the course of the month, and so will I. But yet, if you look at number 4, there's something very interesting that happens. In Kiddush Levana, we make a very interesting Yiratzon. It's a beautiful tefillah at the end. Look what it writes. Number 4. Should be your will, Hashem. God, my God, and the God of my fathers. Lemalos pigimas halevana. When Mashiach comes, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I'm asking you that Emiratz Hashem, you will fill in the deficiency of the moon. V'lo yeba shumiyot. There should be no deficiency in the moon. V'or halevana ke'or hachama u'ke'or shivas mebreshis. And one day, the moon will be just like the sun. So remember again, this harkens back to the Genesis narrative. We know the story. When HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the sun and the moon, the Torah says he created the Shnei Ma'oros HaGedolim, the 2 large luminaries. And then the Torah subsequently goes on to say that there was a large luminary, which shone by day, that was the sun, and a small luminary, Ma'ara Katon, Shalas Balayla, that's the moon. So Rashi points out the whole medrash that has a discussion between the moon and the sun. Originally, the moon and the sun were created equal. The moon says 2 kings cannot share the same crown. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, you're right. Lech umi'et esatzmeich. Go make yourself smaller. Okay? Different shir, what exactly that means. Right? But the idea is, isn't it incredible in this Yiratzon? So here, the moon is great. I identify with the moon, right? The moon is fantastic. The moon is me, I'm the moon. We're all in this thing, in this world, in life together. And yet in this Yiratzon, what do we say? HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but one day, you'll make the moon back like the sun. One day you'll fill in the light deficiency of the moon. One day you'll make the moon that same source of consistent, luminescent, radiant light, just like the sun. Good. So I've always found this interesting, that on one hand, like, Hashem Baruch Hu gives us this mitzvah, links us with the moon. And that's why, I point out to you, our calendar is based on the moon. We have a lunar calendar, not a solar calendar, right? All of this is by design. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is making the moon part and parcel of the fabric of our lives. And it is the most validating piece of divine advice, instruction, hadracha. We're the moon, and it's okay. And it's HaKadosh Baruch Hu understands it. Just strive for consistency, even though you know that you will never deliver. And when you wax and you wane, just make sure not to give up, keep coming back. And yet, in the beginning of the month, as I'm almost like re-solidifying my relationship with this moon dynamic, I say, but you know what I really want to be? What I really want to be is the sun. I really want to be the sun. So the question is like, what does that mean? What does that mean? Again, if the sun represents consistency and the moon represents inconsistency, so what am I saying? That I want to be consistent? But we just got finished saying what makes HaKadosh Baruch Hu is that he's consistent, and what makes us mortal is that we're not consistent. So on one hand, I identify with the moon, but yet on the other hand, I'm asking HaKadosh Baruch Hu that I want one day to be like the sun. So what is it that I'm asking for when I say HaKadosh Baruch Hu, make me like the sun? It can't be the consistency, because that level of sun-like consistency, we are not really capable of delivering on. So what is this? I want to show you something amazing. And the truth is, I was going to give a different shir tonight, but we actually did this Gemara that I'm going to quote to you now in Daf Yomi this morning. And the Gemara just impacted me in a very profound way. So I wanted to share. So look at number 5. This is from this morning's Daf Yomi. So the Gemara says as follows. Amar Papa, I'm not going to give you all of the halachic background because it's not necessarily material to this. So we're kind of picking up mid-conversation. The Gemara says, Shmamina, Shimsha, Sumkasihi. The Gemara says, you see from here, there's a whole discussion. Okay, fine, I'll tell you. Right? There's a whole discussion, right, about if you sell wheat and you end up delivering the wrong kind of wheat. So who's allowed to void the sale? So the Gemara says there are 2 types of wheat. 2 types of wheat. Red wheat and white wheat. Okay. And the Mishnah happens to call red wheat shachmasi. So the Gemara, through a whole bunch of etymological pieces, the Gemara says Shoshach Masi, which has the shorish of Chama, which means sun, must mean red. So the Gemara says, you see from here that the sun is red. The Gemara says, of course the sun is red. Teda the kasamkut safro panya. So it's very obvious why. When the sun rises, you can see it's a red ball. When it sets, it's a red ball. What about the whole day? The reason why it doesn't look red throughout the day is because when it's set against the backdrop of the sky, the eye is not able to see the redness of the sun. But in the early morning, when the sun is against the backdrop of a dark sky, or at night, when the sun is against the backdrop of a dark sky, the sun is red. Okay, so this is the Gemara says, you see from here, the sun is red. The Gemara then launches a different discussion where the pasuk compares tsaras to the sun. Now tsaras, what's tsaras? Now we always translate tsaras as leprosy. It's not really leprosy, because remember, leprosy is an actual disease. Tsaras is a physical manifestation of a spiritual illness. So tsaras is not an actual physical disease, it's a spiritual disease that manifests with physical symptoms. So the Gemara compares tsaras to the sun. So it says, 1 second. If we're comparing tsaras to the sun, then it must be the sun is what color? Sun is what color? White. But 1 second. If the sun is really white, then how do you explain the fact that what? That in the morning and in the evening, it's red. It's a good kasha, no? It's overwhelming. So you're going to tell me that on one hand, the sun is white because the Torah compares it to tsaras. But I just want to point out to you something very beautiful about the way we think as Jews. Our sense of truth and right and wrong does not come from what we perceive or what we see. It comes from what the Torah tells us. And this is incredible, and this is why as a people we've survived for thousands of years. Because whereas the world often defines right and wrong by whatever trend is in, or whatever ism is going around, or whatever somebody feels or identifies or whatever else, we don't believe in any of that. Our sense of right and wrong, truth and falsehood, is fundamentally and solely determined by the Ribono Shel Olam and the way he expresses it in his Torah. So if someone were to ask you, how do you know what color the sun is? So the Gemara says, it must be white. Why? Because the Torah compares it to tsaras. It's incredible. But here's the problem, okay? So I'll accept that premise. But then how do you explain the fact that the sun is red in the morning and red in the evening? So look at this Gemara. Take a look at the last two lines, number 5. End of the second last line. Ha kasam katsafro panya. So if the sun is really white, how do you explain the fact that it is red in the morning and get ready for this? Get ready for this. Bitsafra dechalfa abe vardi de Gan Eden. In the morning when the sun is rising, the sun passes over the rose garden of Gan Eden. So apparently Gan Eden has a rose garden, and it has a rose garden, which by the way, just as an aside, there are a lot of different scents and smells associated with Gan Eden, right? For example, when we think about Adam and Chava, what did Adam and Chava eat that they weren't supposed to? Fruit. What fruit? Right? So it's interesting. It's a big machlokes. The one thing no one ever suggests is an apple. It wasn't an apple. So where do apples come from in this narrative? Because Gan Eden is compared to a stei tapuchim. The scent in Kohel Shir Hashim, the scent of Gan Eden is the scent of an apple orchard. So you have the scent of apples associated with Gan Eden, and you have ultimately, again, roses also associated with Gan Eden. Roses are associated with Klal Yisrael, associated with Gan Eden. So the Gemara says something so beautiful, that every single morning when the sun is rising, the sun passes by the rose garden of Gan Eden. So what's the redness? The redness of the roses reflect off the sun. That's what happens every single morning. What about the evening? The Gemara says, Bepanya dechalfa pischa de Gehenom. In the evening, when everyone understands this one, right? In the evening, when the sun is setting, it passes by the entranceway of Gehenom. There are fires in Gehenom, whatever that means, and the redness of the fires of Gehenom color the sun. So, leaving aside the machlokes about what color is the sun, is it red or is it white? One thing is clear, is it's red in the morning and it's red in the evening. And at least one possibility is the redness of the sun in the morning just the imagery is so beautiful that the sun begins its day going through Gan Eden and ultimately again sets in the glow of the fires of Gehenom. Now, I'll just also point out the Gemara says V'ika, the last 3 lines of the Gemara, number 5, V'ika ge'amri ibcha. There are others who say the opposite, meaning that in the morning when it rises over the entranceway of Gehenom. So it's the fires of Gehenom that give it the redness, and when it sets by the entranceway, the rose garden of Gan Eden, which give it its redness. So when you see a Gemara like this, you remember, Chazal don't just say like nice things because they sound nice. There's always a deeper message embedded in it's such a beautiful, just the imagery. By the way, after you see this, you never look at a sunset or a sunrise the same, right? Everything, your entire perception of nature changes. But I think in this Gemara, Chazal teaching us another incredible idea. I'll tell you what struck me about this. That every day when the sun comes up, every day, right? When you wake up in the morning, the sun comes up, a new day. Every day has the ability to be a Gan Eden. Every single day you have the ability to accomplish incredible things. Every single day I have the ability to affect dramatic change. Every day I have the ability to make a difference. Every day begins with the possibility of being a Gan Eden. But what happens so many times throughout life? I take a day that could have been a Gan Eden, and what do I do? I turn it into a Gehenom. And we turn our days into Gehenom in so many different ways. Whether it's through sinas chinam, whether it's through hatred, whether it's through not nurturing our relationships, whether it's through averos that we commit, or a variety of different things. We know no one needs an explanation as to how to turn a day into Gehenom. We've all done it. We've all taken a day that could have been Gan Eden, and whatever day, I woke up on the wrong side of the bed, someone said something negative to me, I'm unhappy about myself, about my life, and I just unleash. And I take a day that started in the rose garden of Gan Eden, and I turned it into Gehenom. But the opposite is also true. That you could take a day that begins as a Gehenom, and you could turn it into a Gan Eden. You could take a day that begins with so much pain and so much difficulty and so much challenge, and if you put your mind to it, you could find a way to turn it around. You may not be able to change all of your circumstances, that we all know, but so much is in our disposition, so much is in our outlook. So the Gemara says every single day, one thing is happening, right? One of two dynamics. Either your sun, your personal sun, is rising in Gan Eden, and now the question is, are you going to take a Gan Eden day and turn it into Gehenom? Or the sun is rising in Gehenom, and are you going to take a Gehenom day and turn it into Gehenom? I'm sorry?
Turn it into Gan Eden.
Turn it into Gan Eden, thank you. And this is the dynamic, and this is the choice that we have to make every single day. You see, the sun doesn't have a choice, right? The sun runs on Teva, it's nature. But the sun is almost modeling for us like what our choices are in life. You want a Gan Eden life, you want a Gehenom life. Now, here's the incredible part, right? No matter which order you go with, one thing is always true, which is, where is the sun going to be over the course of any given day? Where is it going to be? Gan Eden and Gehenom. And what's going to happen in your life on any given day? Gan Eden and Gehenom. And this is incredibly important to accept as a function of the human condition. Some days the Gehenom is not so bad. It's just like a shtickle Gehenom. It's not so bad, a little bit of Gehenom, right? And it's mostly Gan Eden. And some days, again, it's mostly Gehenom, and it's very little Gan Eden. But just like the sun has every day, right? There's no day like on Thursdays is just Gan Eden, right? And Mondays is just Gehenom. It doesn't work that way. Every single day. Again, the only machlokes is where is the sun starting and where is the sun ending. But on any given day, the sun always experiences Gan Eden and Gehenom. But the incredible part about the sun is it never remains in any one place and always allows itself to move from one experience to another. So whether it's from Gan Eden to Gehenom, or whether it's from Gehenom to Gan Eden, that is the power of the sun. And the truth is, I'll show you something amazing. It's amazing to think that we're almost at the Yom Tovim. Right? Incredible to be almost at the Yom Tovim. Almost finishing the Torah, beginning Sefer Bereshis. And of course, one of the most dramatic stories in number 6, in Parshas Noach. So we know that Noach sends the Yonah, he sends the dove, to go out and see if there's dry land. So if you look at number 6, what does the Yonah bring? So the dove goes out, the second time the dove goes out, and it comes back with an olive branch. An olive branch. So the Medrash number 7 says something amazing. Where did the dove get the olive branch from? I got it. We understand the olive branch represented what? That there was dry land. Just out of curiosity, where did it come from? So the Gemara says, Rabbi Amar, Niftechula Sha'ari Gan Eden V'Evio Osa. The dove flew into Gan Eden. The dove flew into Gan Eden and grabbed an olive branch from there. There's a beautiful sefer written by Rav Zuckerman, who was the founder of the Yeshivos Bnei Akiva in Eretz Yisrael. And he writes something so beautiful over here. He says, why is it that the dove got the olive branch from Gan Eden? And Rav Zuckerman, you can read it inside, but I'll tell you it outside. He says something so beautiful. He says, if you look at the story of the flood, what happened? HaKadosh Baruch Hu made a Gan Eden, and man turned it into a Gehenom. That was the story of the flood. HaKadosh Baruch Hu created a beautiful world, and man destroyed it. When the dove goes ahead and brings back the olive branch, the dove was showing Noach, if you want to, you could take Gehenom and rebuild it into Gan Eden. It's all a question of what you want to do. And perhaps in Kiddush Levana, this is worse. I'm a moon, definitely a moon, right? We're all moons. At the end of the day, so much of me is embedded in the moon, so much of the moon is embedded in me. I wax and wane, I'm inconsistent. I recognize all of these things. But Baruch, I just want to tell you something. Like we sing that Yiratzon. Yiratzon ofanach Hashem Elokei Avosai lemalos pigimas halavana. I want to be a son. But what does it mean I want to be a son? It can't mean that I want to be consistent. Of course, we all want to be consistent. But I recognize I'm not really going to be consistent. I just have to consistently try to be consistent, even though I know I'm going to be consistently inconsistent. Like that's my avoda. So as when I want to be the son, I want to have that koach. First of all, I want to be the kind of person where every single day I wake up and I recognize I can create Gan Eden. Gan Eden doesn't mean everything is perfect. Gan Eden doesn't mean everything falls into place. Gan Eden just means you could create something beautiful for yourself. I want to be that kind of person who understands that every day when I wake up, I can create Gan Eden, and I want to resist the temptation to derail things and turn my Gan Eden into a Gehenom. On the other hand, I want to be the kind of person that if I find myself in Gehenom, I want to find the koach to change my circumstances into Gan Eden. I want that dove-like strength. I want that sun-like strength. Every time we see the sun reminds us, don't be foolish and take a beautiful life and turn it into a disaster. That's lesson 1. And lesson 2, even if life is a disaster, try your best, do your best to try to turn things around. Turn your Gehenom into a Gan Eden and try your best never to turn your Gan Eden into a Gehenom. I was thinking about this idea, especially when it comes to Chodesh Elul. So as we go into Rosh Hashanah is really all about the moon, right? If you think about it, deep down, what's our hardest part of Rosh Hashanah? Right? What's the hardest part? Because Rosh Hashanah is not really like tshuva, right? We'll talk about this more next week. But what's the hardest part of Rosh Hashanah? Deep down, what's the hardest part of Rosh Hashanah? Incredible. Okay, I guess I'll be the shagets over here. All right, so fine. So what's the hardest part? The hardest part of Rosh Hashanah is like, I'm saying all this stuff that I'm going to do, I'm going to change, and there is a gnawing part of me that says, come on, you're giving this canned speech again. Right? This is what you're doing again. I always mention, right? Here's the great part about Rosh Hashanah. For myself, I said the great part about Rosh Hashanah is I can honestly say I have no new averos to confess. I just have to confess all the same ones that I haven't stopped doing. So the good news is, like, I haven't diversified my sin portfolio. Like, in other words, it's not like, I dabbled in like some idolatry or some, gilarah, some shvichos damim. I could say honestly, like, I actually did not broaden my sin horizons this past year, right? But I'm still doing a lot of the same stuff. So Rosh Hashanah comes, and Rosh Hashanah's identity is embedded with the moon, almost as if to give us a Chash Baruch says, okay, I got it, I know, it's the same speech. Chash Baruch says, I've been listening to your same speech for decades. for decades. And it's okay, because maybe, you know what, maybe your father had the same speech, your grandfather had the same speech, your great-grandfather, so this is already minhag avosseinu b'yadeinu, right? Already, again, they've been the same speech in your mishpacha for generations. Okay, it's okay. It's okay. Just once again, need you to try. Need you to try. So perhaps if Rosh Hashanah is about the moon, then Chodesh Elul is about the sun. That this is the month where I take a look at my life and I just ask myself, like, stop, because so many of us are on that, what do you call it? The hamster wheel, right? So on the hamster wheel, right? And we're running and we're running and we're running and we're accomplishing things, but like, life is like a blur. It's just a blur. And Chodesh Elul, like these days when I wake up in the morning, there has to be this conscious awareness. How do I make today Gan Eden? And how do I not mess it up? Because, you know, the default setting of life is Gan Eden. That's the default. More often than not, you have to mess stuff up in order for it to go. I'm not talking about crazy external circumstance. I'm talking just like day-to-day life. There's bracha, there's shefa, there's light, there's beauty. I have an opportunity for Gan Eden. How do I keep that and not run it into the ground of Gehenom? And if I'm in Gehenom, maybe my life is really not what I want it to be. So you have a choice. When your life is not what you want it to be, you have a choice. Choice number one is, which is the favorite choice amongst most people, complain. Complain, followed by assignment of blame. Right? My life is not the way that I want it because of, and you could go in chronological order, severe to least severe, who impacted you most, who impacted you least, who you love most. And by the way, a lot of those things can be very legitimate because there are other people in our lives who have had terrible impacts on us. But you have to decide whether or not you want that to mark you for the rest of your life. You have to decide what you're gonna do with that. So is this it? Is this it? I'm gonna lament that this is my life, woe is me, because of all the things, legitimate, difficult things that happened to me. Okay, that's it. So my avoda is to complain and to lament about the life I could have had but didn't have, and this is where I am. You could do that, and maybe you're even justified in doing that. The question is, where's it gonna get you? And we all know the answer to that because we all do this at different times, nowhere. Or instead I say, you know what, maybe my life is Gehenom. Maybe there are circumstances that are real Gehenom, but you know what, there's a piece of me that's the sun. And the sun moves every single day from Gehenom to Gan Eden. It might start the day in Gehenom, but by the end of the day, how beautiful is it that it is reflecting the rose bushes of Gan Eden. And maybe I could capture a little bit of that for my life as well. Maybe even though things are difficult and things never have gone as planned, and there have been overwhelming circumstances, I refuse to lose myself in that. Instead, I'm gonna be that dove who brings the olive branch from Gan Eden, showing that man can make Gan Eden into Gehenom, and then he can make Gehenom into Gan Eden. I'm gonna be a little bit like the sun. And even if right now my life is in a place that I'm not happy with, how do I move my personalistic sun into the shadow of the rose garden of Gan Eden? That's the avoda of Elul. What do we need to do to move our lives forward? What do I need to do to preserve the beauty? And if you're in Gan Eden, beautiful, beautiful. If you're living in Gan Eden, absolutely fantastic. Then your avodah is to figure out how do you stay there and not derail yourself. And if you're living in Gehenom, even if it's episodic Gehenom, temporary Gehenom, then my avodah is how do I get myself out of this into the reflection of the rose garden of Gan Eden. That is the avodah of Elul. To figure out what we need to do to move our sun. What we need to do to really affect change in the way that we live, in the personalities we've cultivated, and in the lifestyles that we have chiseled out for ourselves. Rosh Hashanah has a different avodah. We'll talk about that next week. But for Elul, to figure out where our sun is currently situated, again, if it's Gan Eden, Zachit, and then try to figure out how to keep it there. And if it's Gehenom, how do I move it forward? This is our avodah of Elul. Just imagine that if we all make the necessary adjustments, even some of the adjustments and some of the tweaks and some of the changes, imagine what it must be like to live in the glow of the rose garden of Gan Eden. Imagine what that must feel like. Imagine what that warmth feels like on your face. Imagine what that warmth feels like in your heart and in your soul. Halabai, we should be zocheh to find the courage to make the necessary changes, to move our sun, to where it needs to be, and to live lives in the beautiful and protective shadow of the rose garden of Gan Eden. All right, to stop over here for tonight. Next week in Meretz Hashem, our final shir before Rosh Hashanah, and then I think after that, we have one shir during Aseret Sinit Shuvah, I believe. All right, we'll post if you're not on the WhatsApp chat, the QR code is up here, so you can join the chat. We post all the information as well as a recording of the shir in there. Have a wonderful evening.